What motivated you to become a writer?
That's the first question? Okay, well, at 10 years old, well, as a kid, my older brother was an artist. He was a painter. And of course, like any little brother, I wanted to protect my older brother. But at 10 years old, my grandmother passed away. Sort of like, it was strange, it was my first death, and like sort of like, oh, this is where I trying to deal with that. And I heard for the first time also my mother in pain, right? That had never been an issue because there was nothing for her to be in pain about, so I thought. And so this was the first time I kind of watched my mother, the child, mourn and grieve. And I realized that like there was no sort of picture I could draw to like make her feel better. So I wrote like 4 lines down on a piece of paper and just kind of gave it to her, thinking nothing of it. And she printed it on the back of the funeral program, and I read it at the funeral. And so there was this whole like hubbub about like, oh, you know, Jason's gonna be a poet, he's gonna be a writer, yada 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 yada. And then shortly after, she lost 7 siblings within the next like 2 years. It's a big family, and they all, that generation started to die out. And so everybody was like, yo, can you write something for my grandma? Can you write something for your auntie? Yada yada yada. So the first like 10 poems were like these funeral poems, like these death poems. And after that, it sort of snowballed. And then I guess it just sort of, it kind of chose me, you know, more than me choosing it. I kind of just went with it, I suppose.
Where do you find your inspiration?
I mean, the easy answer, like the obvious answer is like, oh, I find it everywhere, you know. But for me, mostly within myself. You know, I'm an inside-out writer, right? Like the things that I write about are coming from the inside, which is interesting only because I write about a lot of really kind of harsh things and hard things. But those are the parts of me that are hard and harsh, right? There's a lot of there. I feel like in me and in all of us, there's a lot of beauty, and I feel like there's a lot of ugly. And the ugly, we often pretend like it's not there, right? Because I'm a nice person, or I try to be a good guy, doesn't mean that I don't have ugly sides, or there's a lot of ugliness in there. And so when I write it, I'm writing to sort of expose that and to sort of, you know, display that in some sort of way that allows everyone else to sort of relax a bit about their own ugliness. It's like, yo, son, if I can tell you that like I've suffered from psychosomatic trauma, right, where I, you know, and this is true, you know, I don't mind, you know, this is true that like I couldn't eat for like 11 months, right? Just stressed out about, because at the time I was working with a bunch of like kids who were, you know, struggling in their homes and drug addicts and all this kind of stuff like that. And it just kind of, as a writer and as an artist, it's sort of like, you know, I'm taking that in and I live with that. I couldn't eat for 11 months. Went to the doctor like once every 2 weeks trying to figure out what's wrong with me, you know, and doing all these different surgeries and looking at my inside my intestines and all this. I'm trying to figure out why I couldn't eat any food. I lost 65 pounds and like all this stuff. And then I realized, God, the one thing that we pretend doesn't exist is like, you know, the struggle with mental health, you know, the struggle with like, it's a mental health issue, right? The struggle with sort of like understanding what's happening to you emotionally and mentally, and then going to get help for that and having to see therapists and not feeling like being okay with going to see a therapist and a psychologist and telling people like, son, I got to go see my therapist because I need to work this out, and not be ashamed of that. And so now in the next book that I'm writing about about sort of like that whole thing, the only reason that I know about that is because I've experienced that, right? And I'm able to kind of be honest with myself and put that out there. You know what I mean? And I live my life like that. If it wasn't for, like, I'm a sheer honesty. I can tell you my strengths, I can tell you my weaknesses. And it's those honest moments that allow me to produce the work that I produce and sort of continue to push forward. You know what I mean? And as long as I'm doing that, I'll never run out of material.
I know
I'll
that's
never
right.
run out, you know, forever. Like, you know what I mean? Because there's always going to be something good.
Yeah.
There's always going to be something bad.
That's so true.